Hello. I just wanted to come on tonight because I have poison ivy, which would in itself not be very remarkable, except that it's perfect that I have poison ivy. Because I thought I wasn't actually allergic to poison ivy. In fact, I was certain that I wasn't allergic to poison ivy. I was so certain that I wasn't allergic to poison ivy that I pulled out a bunch of poison ivy with my bare hands. So last weekend, I went to visit my new boyfriend's parents, and it's been a really long time since I've cared about people pleasing or pleasing anyone or trying to get anyone to like me, really. And this was really the first time in maybe even years that I wanted somebody to like me. And so, as usually happens in that case, I turn away from my openness and consider what kind of performance might be good. And so I brought a plant because I'm a gardener. So I brought a plant and I went just anything that she said needed to be done in her garden. I was like, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'm happy to do it. And I know whenever I'm forcing like that, I'm hiding the little pink thing. I'm hiding the little spot of tenderness, the spot of insecurity, of vulnerability, that little piece of my heart that I don't want anyone to see. And so I had to really think, okay, so what's behind this performance of, oh my God, look how spectacular I am. I can pull out poison ivy with my bare hands. What thing am I not wanting her to see that I'm creating this distraction so she'll look over here instead of here? And I was kind of surprised at what I found when I dug down, because these are insecurities and things around shame that I didn't think I carried anymore. And a little bit of grief that I didn't think I carried anymore. And then when I went into this performance mode, into this protective mode, and I noticed that, because that's really the point of my practice, not to be some kind of flawless human. It's just to notice when I'm fucking up. And so as I felt myself pushing and pushing, poison ivy, trim your holly bush, sure, sure, sure. Anything, like me, please. So as I dropped back into my body and got out of this spinning identity turbine up there with this desire to be liked, and I was able to really drop back in, what I found was, who would want their only son to be with a recovering alcoholic? And who would want their only son to be with somebody too old to have kids? And I was so surprised to find these two little pink spots under all that performing. Because personally for me, I think of my recovery journey as something that I actually feel amazing about, that I wouldn't be able to be the woman sitting here now without that. If I hadn't had an 8-year dark night of the soul, I wouldn't be in the stable place that I'm at now. So when that came up, like that could still be seen as a liability, as something that made me worth less. It brought me all the way back and all the way down. And what threw me off even more is that I had turned away from that. I had actually given over to that shame, turned away, and created a distraction. And that was right next to the piece about being too old to have kids. Here I was projecting onto somebody else that I've just met their desire to have a grandchild. That I was somehow making myself so important that I was ignoring the whole constellation of causes and conditions that have led up to this moment of me, this woman, being in this other woman's house, that I thought it was all me. I made it all me, that I was taking away her opportunity to have a grandchild. I was projecting my relationship with her son into the future. I was projecting her desires into the future, and take out of the equation the fact that my boyfriend never has wanted to have kids. But I still managed to find a spot of shame in me, this little pink spot that I didn't want to touch. And so instead, put on a show. Look how amazing I am. I might be too old to have kids. I might be a recovering alcoholic, but I can pull out poison ivy with my bare hands. And how often do we do this? How often do we come toward this point of connection? Like maybe not having a grandchild was a little pink spot in her too. And here's this little pink spot in me. And these little pink spots are coming closer and closer together, like there's almost this intimate connection, but instead I turn away. And how often do we do that? When we hear that resonant hum, where we're almost shedding all of the ego, all of the identity, all of the performance, and touching each other's little pink spots, so to speak, And so later, a couple days later, when it became obvious that I was actually allergic to poison ivy, my boyfriend looked at me and he's like, "Do you think there's a lesson about hubris in here?" I thought, yeah. And what is hubris? What is arrogance? It's a cover. It's a performance keeping the people distracted from what you don't want them to see. Those pieces of being in recovery, of the years that were lost to alcoholism in my life, as much as they were necessary, there is still that little tiny spot of shame that I didn't know was still deep, deep, deep down under there. It wasn't until I reacted to it that it was able to come up. And partly I think that allowing it to come up, being able to notice that I turned away, allowed it to fully come up. And that's really the whole point of practice. Not to make anybody perfect, just to be able to notice. So then I can bear witness to that thing in me that I couldn't see. That I had laid over with the feeling of success about my recovery. But underneath that scar tissue and that freshly healed skin surrounding it was that little tiny piece still, that little pink spot that I wasn't touching in my everyday life. And sometimes we can't see those little pink spots until we turn away. And for me, I felt that clench of turning away in my body. I could feel my whole system contract. Like I was squeezing out something that was not authentic. I was squeezing out a show. So in that case, what happens to my self-compassion? Where did my self-compassion go? I traded my self-compassion for a desire to be liked. So when I let that go, I can finally come back into my body, come back into my feet, and have self-compassion for my lack of self-compassion, which is really when self-compassion is most useful. And then I was thinking about poison ivy itself. Like we've given this thing this name based on our reaction to it. Poison ivy in itself is not poison. my body reacted to it. It's not inherent in the plant itself. It's in how I receive it, how my body reacts. And how many things do we name that way? How many things do we name according to how we react to them instead of according to their actual nature? So I was thinking about that a lot. Just scratching the shit out of my skin mostly. I'm thinking about all of the times, that I've turned away from being seen, turned away from seeing those little places in myself. And I think that's what comes up too when I'm about to teach. Like, this always happens when I'm about to teach something. So I have the Fuck Suffering group coming up. And so I always get the lessons, always, every time. And rarely do I get them as, like, obviously as being covered in poison ivy when I'm about to teach self-compassion and I'm going about people pleasing, when I'm about to teach the drama triangle and boundaries. And so I have to laugh that, is there any other thing that could bring me more completely into my body than poison ivy, than being covered with scratchy skin, being in my own skin with such a level of discomfort that I'm like finding my own level of what's bearable. And that's like, it's perfect. And that's what brings me back to trust. That's what brings me back to trust every time. Brings me back into my body and back into trust. I was so sure, so certain that I wasn't allergic to poison ivy. So certain. And it's when I get into certainty, when I fall out of beginner's mind, when I lose that trust in the unfolding, and I think I know, trouble is not usually far behind. Because that certainty breeds arrogance. That trust in the unfolding breeds confidence. And there are two completely different approaches. One is soft in my body, and the other is clenched and sure, going forward, no matter what, plowing through. And there are moments for that, for sure. But man, I miss a lot if I stay locked in that mode. I miss a lot if I stay locked on those goals and on those certainties about who I am and who I'm becoming. I was so sure that that I had not an ounce of shame left about my recovery. I was so sure that I was over the grief of never becoming a mother. But we turn away until we don't. We turn away and turn away until we feel ourselves turning away, and we feel all of the things that are over here when we're looking over here. All of the ways in which I'm afraid to be fully alive because I don't want to feel that shame, because that shame is part of being fully alive. If I can't metabolize that, it can never leave my system. It calcifies, it gets stuck down in there. And I'm wondering, why does my hip hurt? Why does my shoulder hurt? Yeah. There can be, not for everybody maybe, but there was a long, hard road for me to learn how to be gentle with myself. And to not get too certain, and to stay in that beginner's mind. To love not knowing. To absolutely, wholeheartedly love not knowing. That has really not been easy. But it's been absolutely necessary. It's been the only way to really be free. So if I'm telling you this because I think the way I work with myself is the way I work with other people. So this process of getting back into the body, noticing, being able to feel that clench when I'm turned away, being able to soften into turning toward, being able to feel that frequency of somebody else's little pink spot, and feeling when the pitch of that becomes unbearable and I turn away, turn back. How can I turn back? How can I open again when I start to close? That's what I teach, starting with the tools of when am I stepping onto the drama triangle? When am I not holding a boundary? And when, as in this case, am I completely absent self compassion? When have I just lost the thread of self compassion? Because when I lose the thread of self compassion, I can't have compassion for others. I'm too busy performing being a good person for them to actually connect. People pleasing prohibits connection. So those are the three main skills we're going to be working on in the Fuck Suffering group. DM me if you're interested in joining. I'm really looking forward to teaching again. It's been a little while of getting really clear on what it is I do. Thank you. And I hope you have an excellent rest of your Saturday night.